Hello and welcome to the CircuitPython Weekly for July 20th, 2020. I'm Scott and I work on CircuitPython for Adafruit. CircuitPython is an easy-to-use, beginner-friendly version of Python for microcontrollers, which are little, tiny, inexpensive computers. The goal is to make coding and computing more accessible. Adafruit is an open source and open hardware electronics company based out of New York, who pays for me and a number of us others to work on CircuitPython full time. So please support them by going to adafruit.com and purchase some good hardware there to support us. And this is our community meeting that we do every week. It's usually at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on the Adafruit Discord server, which everyone is welcome to join by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. We've got lots of channels to show off your projects and get help and talk about CircuitPython development there. Like I said, the meeting is at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. You can join it by joining into the CircuitPython voice channel and text channel in the Discord server. This meeting is recorded, so be aware of that. I am recording it from my computer. It will be posted to the Adafruit YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Adafruit. And it will also be kind of broadcast just audio only out to podcast feeds as well. So if you're a podcast person, you can listen to it that way. With the recording, we do post notes. And if you're in the meeting live, you can pull up the notes doc to kind of see what the plan is for the meeting ahead. So I recommend that as well. The meeting happens in 5 parts. First, we'll start with a community news section where we go over some of the cool stuff we've seen online around the web regarding Python and CircuitPython and MicroPython. After that, we'll have the state of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka, which is a statistics overview of the project meant to ground us in the kind of like the realities of how things are going. And we'll do that in 3 subparts. After that, we have Hug Reports, which is the first thing that the first of 2 sections that are kind of done in a round robin, where I will start and go through the list of the folks in the voice channel, giving everybody an opportunity to speak. If you don't want to do that, you're more than welcome to say either put text and notes in the notes doc and I'll read those off, or let us know you're lurking and we'll just skip over you, and that's totally cool. So that's how round robin works. Hug Reports in general is a chance for you to say thank you to folks for the work that they've been doing within our community. It's a great way for us to both thank folks for the cool things they've been doing and reinforce the ideals of our community as well. After Hug Reports, we have Status Updates, which is another round robin, but this time it's a chance for you to talk briefly about what you've been working on and what you plan on working on in the coming week. It's really helpful for like people who have done something similar to give tips or tricks or get advice from that. If there are longer form topics, we save those till the end of the meeting into the In the Weeds section, which is our last section. And this is a chance for like longer form discussion or any questions that people have that think that it might be longer form as well. If you have topics for In the Weeds, please put them into the section in the notes doc before we get there. That way it'll make it quick for us to go from one topic to another. When we first started this meeting, it was like sitting and waiting for people to bring things up, and so we want to just get ahead of it. This meeting does tend to last an hour to an hour and a half because we just have so many awesome folks join us. So strap in and enjoy the ride. You can always watch it later or listen to it faster later if you need to as well. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to take a time code once I scroll back up to the top here, which is super handy if you're watching this after the fact and want to skip through the video. So I'll take a time code. First section we have is community news. This is where we go over some of the cool stuff that we've seen online around Python and CircuitPython. And credit to Anne, who puts this together for the newsletter that goes out on Tuesday mornings as well. You can subscribe to the newsletter by going to adafruitdaily.com, select the Python for Microcontrollers newsletter, and you'll get this news plus a lot of other cool stuff too. And I'll talk about that at the end a bit as well. So first up, let me take a time code. There's 2 Python events happening this week that we want people to be aware of. First is the EuroPython conference, which is July 23rd through 26th. EuroPython 2020 this year will be an online conference. The schedule is now available, and Jeff's posting those links. Thank you, Jeff. Attending the conference days will require a ticket. Participating in the sprint days will be free. So there's details there. And then the other event that we've got going on later this week is Pi Ohio 2020, which Kattni has spoken at previously. It says the 13th annual Pi Ohio will be July 25th and 26th. The event will consist of 5 and 10-minute talks, sprints, and discussions, along with the 2 links that Jeff just posted in the Discord. If you're listening to this after the fact, check the note stock for the links here. Next up, we've got an electronic security lock with CircuitPython and an Adafruit PyPortal. Build an electronic security lock for package deliveries, securing physical documents, or granting access to a secret lab. The project uses AWS serverless to create a touchscreen keypad lock that uses SMS to alert a recipient with a custom message and unlock code. CircuitPython runs on an Adafruit PyPortal open source IoT touch display. A relay wired to the PyPortal acts as an electronic switch to bridge power to an electronic solenoid lock. And there's a link there to the project. VirtualVox, who's on Discord, I think is the creator of this project and has also showed it off on Show and Tell as well, if you want to see it there. Very cool. Next up, we have a Clue Internet Data Display. It says, with the Adafruit's Clue, CircuitPython, and eRadionica's Wi-Fi bit, it's simple to fetch data from the internet and show it on screen. There's a Twitter post there and the example code. Next up, we have our own Jeff Epler. He's done a couple blog posts. He's been very prolific on the blogs recently. I subscribed to the feed. It's been cool. The first blog post says Jeff Epler has done a deep dive using the PCF 8523 and the DS3231 real-time clock circuits, which Adafruit sells in feather form factor boards. Sample code is provided to detect which of these 2 boards may be connected to a CircuitPython host, as they both use the same I2C address but different register layouts. That's the first blog post. And then the second blog post is a follow-up that discusses calibrating both of these RTCs against a known frequency source. And I've seen some PRs go by for this as well. So another example of cool stuff that's making our libraries better. Next up, we have building a custom animated LED sign assembly, part 2. This is also from maker Melissa, who's in the meeting. Melissa demonstrates with part two of her Python-powered custom animated LED sign series, covering the software setup of the sign, including how to get your Python script running upon starting the sign. Check that out. Melissa waves in the chat. Next, I thought this would be interesting. Microsoft is seeking a senior program manager. Microsoft's developer division is looking for a senior program manager to help make Azure the best cloud for Python developers, with a link to Microsoft careers and Twitter. And they also say, and for more jobs in maker and tech industries, visit the Adafruit jobs board. It's free for you and companies to use. So that's jobs.adafruit.com. And then lastly, a couple of reminders. First up, oops, I did a parentheses. CircuitPython Day, we've set a date and we want everybody to be involved. So if you want to participate with us, let us know. It says Adafruit has chosen September 9th, 2020 as the snakiest day this year for CircuitPython Day. Much more to come on events and happenings, to include a CircuitPython team live stream, collaboration with hardware and software folks, and highlighting all the things Python and Python on hardware. More information will be forthcoming. Ideas, please send them to circuitpythonday@adafruit.com. So if you want to be involved, we'd love to have you involved. And kudos to Anne for also taking the initiative and leading that effort too. And speaking of things that Anne does, lastly, Anne does the CircuitPython newsletter every week, and we're always looking for more content, all the really cool stuff. Python, CircuitPython, MicroPython. If you see stuff online or you create stuff, we'd love to have it in the newsletter. I've got a link to the draft for this week. That repo has the draft every week. If you want to follow along and help out every week, that would be amazing. And with that, that is community news. Let's go on to the state of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka. This is the kind of more objective part of everything where we take a look at the stats. And yeah, my mind just lost it. Let's start off overall. Overall, we had 25 pull requests merged from 16 different authors, so thank you to all our authors. Some new folks that I see in this list are George Bonish is new, Razvan PHP is new, and Mad Grizzle look new to me, so thank you to those 3 new authors. Thank you to the 13 other folks as well. We really appreciate you. We had 11 reviewers for those 25 pull requests, so thank you to all of our reviewers. As always, we're looking for reviewers, so if you want to level up and get started taking a look at stuff, let us know. We're always happy to point you to things and even provide hardware for reviewers who want to do testing. So reach out to us, let us know. Issues-wise, we had 21 closed issues by 11 people, 13 opened by 9 people. That's a net down of, 8, which is really cool. It's always good to be net down, so thank you to everybody who participated on the issue side of things. Overall, I think we're getting there on 6.0. Jeff did the background task work that was kind of blocking it. We want to let it soak for a couple of weeks, so expect to see an unstable 6.0 release this week, and let us know if you find any issues, but it should be relatively stable. So let us know what you think, and then I'll let Katney and Melissa talk about the other 2 subsections in just a bit. So let me go into the core. On the core side, we had 6 pull requests merged from 4 different authors, so thank you to those folks with 3 reviewers. We have 15 open pull requests. A few of those are pretty old, but most of those are quite young. So thank you to everybody involved in that. And again, we're looking for reviewers, so if you want to help start reviewing core stuff, please let us know. Issues-wise, we had 4 closed issues by 4 people and 7 open by 5 people. For a total of 310 open issues. Now, I think this stat has got to be a little old, because I think on Monday of last week I closed a bunch of issues, so maybe it missed this margin, but that's fine. We have 7 active milestones, and I went and redid this on Friday, so we no longer have any 5x milestones. We don't have a 4x milestone. We just have 6.0, 6x, and 6xx for features and bug fixes. And 7.0 is just for things that are going to break APIs and things we want to do with that. We have 279 open issues for long term, which is kind of just like it'll happen eventually. And we have 1 issue not assigned a milestone. Now's a good time to say that when I did go through this stuff, I wanted to be more aggressive in keeping things actually in the long term section. I think that for the 6x and the 6 features and bug fixes, we should really just be doing the things that are imminent and urgent and that we're going to do pretty quickly. I think especially for bug fixes, I think we had a tendency of marking something as a bug fix if it was just a bug, but we also have a bug label. So I think that if it's a bug but we don't intend or feel like it needs to be fixed very quickly, let's just mark that long-term milestone, but as with the bug label. And I know that Dave P has actually told me that he looks at the bug label. So the secret is out. Dave P looks at the bug labels for stuff. So yeah, that's a great place to start. And I want us to be a bit more strict because there was a lot of stuff in the 5x bug fixes that I just moved to long term instead of carrying over to 6x. So yeah, that's that. Let's go to Katney for libraries.
Thanks, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
So this section is about all of the CircuitPython libraries combined. And we had 17 pull requests merged by 12 authors and 9 reviewers. George Bonish, Mad Grizzle, and Razvan PHP are all new, to call them out again. So thank you very much for joining us. And thank you to everyone who has continued to participate. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of our reviewers. The oldest PR that we merged was 13 days. Most of them were less than a day old. So we're staying pretty solidly on top of some new stuff, um, leaving us with 39 open pull requests, which is actually pretty good. And I know that the oldest of those, the original author, is still slowly working through it. So that's part of why we have one that's been around for so long. We had 14 issues closed by 7 people and 6 opened by 5 people. So we are net down, and that leaves us with 163 open issues. 5 of those have the good first issue label on them, which is excellent. If you are interested in contributing to CircuitPython, check out circuitpython.org/contributing. All this information is available there. All of the open PRs are listed separately. All of the open issues across all of the libraries and a list of library infrastructure issues are available there. And it is an excellent place to get started contributing, as the name would indicate. You can search the issues by label. So for those of you looking for bug labels, we do have a bug label. As well, the good first issue label is a great place to start if you're new to things. We have a guide on contributing to Git or contributing to CircuitPython using Git and GitHub. So if you are new to the whole process, we have a guide for that, and we also are available to help you through learning how to do that. So don't let that part stop you. We are definitely available to help. In terms of library updates in the last 7 days, there was one new library, the AS7341, and a number of updated libraries that I will not list off individually. And that's where we are with the libraries.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney. Next up, we have Maker Melissa for Blinka.
Hello. So Blinka is our CircuitPython compatibility layer for Raspberry Pi and other single board computers. And this last week, we had 2 pull requests merged by 1 author and 3 reviewers, which is pretty cool. There were 2 open pull requests, and there have been 3 closed issues by 2 people and 0 open by 0 people, leaving a net of 23 open issues. There have been 1,503 PyPI downloads in the last week, and we are currently supporting 52 boards. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. All right, and that is it for the State of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka. The next section we have is Hug Reports. Hug Reports is a chance for us to take a little bit of time and thank the folks in our community that have been doing awesome work. All variety of awesome. So it's great to get a bunch of different perspectives on that. This is round robin, as I said earlier. So if you just have text notes, please drop those in the note stock. If you just want to listen in, just let us know you're lurking, and double check that in the note stock that you've been marked as lurking. That's super helpful. Otherwise, we may have some downtime. And with that, let me start off and go down. Actually, Jeff did this thing last week saying who's on deck. So who's the next person after the current person? So Brent, you will be after me. So let me take a time code for myself. First and foremost, a hug report to WarriorWire for Display.io and Async Thoughts. It was nice to see those this morning. And awesome hug report to Foamy Guy for jumping in and trying Vector.io. I think in a lot of cases, we've done really cool stuff with Display.io and Vector.io. We just haven't done a great job of teaching people how to use it. So seeing Foamy Guy jump in and learn and want to document it better is awesome. Thanks to PT and Lady Ada for always doing the right thing, even when it's hard. I had some discussions last week with Phil about this. And lastly, a thank you to CKU and Matthias for helping in CircuitPython. It was cool to see some new names popping up in the CircuitPython dev channel. So thanks to those folks, and let's go to Brent. Can't hear Brent. New mic, new issues. I can read him off. And next up after Brent will be Charles. So, and I should say Andrew Tribble put a group hug in here as well. So I'll read off Brent. Brent says, hug report to Kattni for air quality sensor work. Going to do a project with it soon. Hug report to community moderators. Hug report to Foamy Guy and all those working on Display.io text libraries. Hug report to Tan Newt for BroadcastNet, Networking Live, and API work. And lastly, Jerry N for still pushing ahead on the RFM9X size issue. And now we have Charles.
First of all, a hug to you, Tanu, for your deep dives. I'm really interested in all the guts that you're dealing with, and a group hug to everybody else. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. Okay. Next up is Dan, and then I'll read off David Glaude. So go ahead,
Hi.
Dan.
Hello. So 3 things. I'd like to thank Dave Putz, who's been working very hard on checking. He proposed a fix for very long ints doing operations that basically starved out USB. And so I had some initial questions about that, and it turned out he was in the background doing a whole bunch of checking with a logic analyzer and a bunch of tests that I didn't know he was doing. We had a great audio chat about that, and he's kind of finished the PR, and we're talking about it still, but he did a really thorough job on the testing. And then thanks to Jeff, who has been working on fixing up the background task stuff and has done it in what I think is a very thoughtful way and has thought about kind of all the possible cases. And I really appreciate him taking the time to think that through carefully. And then kudos to Star Girl or Thea Codes, has become an expert on using the SAMD51 ADC for her own synth board, and eventually we hope we will get some additions to Analog IO based on this work. Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And Dave P corrected me. Dave P is not lurking. Hey, Crazy Gnarls, we're in the middle of a...
Hello.
Alright, do you mean to be joining a meeting?
Désolé, je comprends pas, je suis français.
Oh,
David Glaude speaks French. I do not. Anybody else speak French?
I wish I did.
I know, I wish I did too.
Ok.
Sorry.
Ah, c'est pas un problème. Not problem.
Yeah, David G can help. But right now we are in a meeting, so let's go to Dave P.
A quick report to Pat for suggesting that I use a logic analyzer. I've used them for protocols before, but never for timing issues on microprocessors. Turns out it's a lot of fun. And a hug report to Dan for taking the time to help me figure out some really weird timing issues where adding code made things run faster. And a group hug to all.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. All right, next up we have notes from David Glaude, who says, hug report to Kattni for worker review on the PMS 5003 air quality sensor. Hug report to Tan Newt for BroadcastNet and John Park for the Learn Guide. And hug report to Tan Newt for live broadcasting an internet major failure and continuing to code. Yeah. All right, thank you. Next up, we have Deshibu.
Okay, so it's been a while, so there will be a number of them.
Awesome.
To Dan for all the reviews that he's doing of my pull requests, which are always timely and always suggestions. For Scott for the Friday stream, it's great fun to look how you work. For Hero Effect for working on ST and CRC2 boards, really awesome work you are doing. Or Tia for squeezing more from hardware that we already have. That's always a good present when you thought you had something, and then you discover that actually there is more to it than you thought. And to Jeff for the work on the background. It's really great to have the whole thing more reliable. So
Awesome. Thanks to Shipu. All right. Erdmike26, I'm assuming you're lurking, so just drop a note in the text channel if you're not. Otherwise, let's go to Foamy Guy. Next up is Higher Effect.
Hello.
Wait. Sorry.
Oh.
Foamy Guy first and then Higher Effect.
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
I'm trying to give people a heads up, but I'm not doing a great job.
I wasn't listening right now.
Well, it got your attention, which is the point. All right, go ahead, Foamy Guy. And we can't hear you. I think you checked your mic.
Oops, how about now?
Yeah, no, there you go.
Okay, sorry about that. Got the extra button now. I'd like to give a hug report to KMatch98 again for helping me with the display text library, as well as testing out some of the changes there, and a bunch of great discussions we've had about the ways it can work, and perhaps how it can work in the future on some different stuff. To Warrior of Wire for their work on Vector IO. I must have missed that whenever that came out. That thing is super cool though, and I've been jumping into that, so I appreciate them working on that, as well as getting me up to speed a little bit and fixing a couple issues that popped up when I first started looking into it. To the GitHub user, GF Baros, they pointed out an issue with the progress bar library, so I appreciate that. And then to you, Scott, as well, for kind of poking into that issue and confirming some of my thoughts about what might be the cause of it. It was good to see that I was on the right track there, so I appreciate it. And that's all I got this week.
Sweet. Thanks, Foamy Guy. All right, on deck we have Jeff, but next is Higher Effect.
Okay. So I've got thank you to Jeff Epler this week for his reviews on the timing stuff, and generally paying attention to the matter and walking me through that. I was working on it. And then a big thank you to just a whole handful of people for giving me some helpful tips on PCBs this week. That included Deshipu, Stargirl, IoT Panic, Shurik, Mad Bodger, and Arturo, who provided some tips on how they do layout and how they find parts and what parts to use. It's all really helpful, so I really appreciate it. That's it for me.
Cool. That's exciting. All right. Let me just read Jason P., who has a note. Hug report to... can't type. Hug report to Tan Newt, myself, for the custom board live guidance last week. Jerry's up after Jeff. So go ahead, Jeff.
All right. Hello.
It sounds like you have the wrong mic, Jeff. It's
all
like
right, well,
super
I'll just power
quiet.
through it then. Is it this mic?
Yeah, that sounded better.
All right. I've got way too many volume indicators going on and things. So anyway, group hug, and then a hug to Dan and Scott for their reviews over the last week, and Scott did some on the weekend. To Dan again, we worked through a particular NRF problem that was vexing me, and he helped me out on Discord to think through things, and we got through it. Thanks to Foamy Guy for reporting a problem that did turn out to be due to background tasks. I misunderstood it a little and looked into the wrong thing, but then found it, and I think we are going to come to a good conclusion on that one. And thanks again to Foamy Guy for staying concentrated on display IO text. It's something where, a little ways back, I thought this needs some love. It's getting that love, and it's coming to a much better place. And you are one of the people on top of that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Okay, Katney's on deck, so let's go to Jerry.
Hi. First, a group hug. This really is a great community, and sometimes I know as a moderator, I get a little, I get a little frustrated with the atmosphere that we see on the moderator side. but it really is uplifting to see all the great stuff that's going on across all the channels, all the help being given all the time. Really is fantastic, and I have to sometimes remind, especially to the moderators, there's really good stuff going on. And a special thanks to Lady Ada for her quicker response and some tips on how to get the new fingerprint sensor up and working under CircuitPython.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. All right. We're going to go to Katney, and then I'll read K-Match off after that.
Hello.
Hello.
All right. So I want to give a hug report to Sedacious for helping a community member out with a weird sensor issue in the Help with CircuitPython channel. It turns out that the sensor is just weird. Doesn't handle resets well. And so he went through all of that with that person, and that was super helpful. To Mr. Certainly for updating the welcome channel with new info and making the rest of it significantly more readable. To Jeff for continuing to work towards running this meeting. To Anne for putting together the original sized images used in the newsletter for me for the newsletter video. It's super incredibly helpful. And gets all the images ready for the newsletter, which has to be a certain width, but the newsletter video is obviously significantly wider than the newsletter, and tiny images look goofy. So Anne's been putting together all the original sized images for me, and it's been making everything super faster than it was. So thank you for that. To Sedacious for the suggestion to solder a Stemma QT cable onto my Metro Mini, and now I have a Perma Stemma connectable Arduino board, which is handy. To community helpers on Discord for always being available and willing to look into everything. To community moderators on Discord for staying on top of keeping our community amazing and everything that involves, and a group hug.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney. Okay, Maker Melissa's on deck, and I'll read off K-Match. But I do want to say that there was a couple belated hugs for K-Match in the text chat first from Foamy Guy and Jeff, so for the display IO stuff. So let's keep that in mind. K-Match's 98's hug reports are a hug report to Foamy Guy for your diligence on display text to give it more capability and accuracy. Hug report to KJW for finding a performance issue with backgrounds on built-in font with display text. And thank you for everyone being cool and positive in crazy times. It's good to have a safe harbor. And Stargirl is on deck, but first we'll go to Maker Melissa.
Hello, I just wanted to give a group hug to KMatch98 and Foamy Guy for working on improving the display text library, and a group hug to everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. And last but not least, we have Stargirl.
Hi, thanks. I just had a group hug for the whole community because this is the best community. Even with the fun that we have in the moderator side of it, it's still the best community.
Yeah. Thank you for helping with that. Thank you for helping keep it the best community, Stargirl.
Definitely.
All right. And that's it for Hug Reports. Thank you, everybody. Hug Reports is always a great time. I'm glad we take the time to do that. Next up, we have status updates, and it's done as a round robin as well. But this time, it's taking a minute or two to talk about what you've been working on in the past week and what you plan on working on in the coming week. I should have taken a time code. But it's super helpful just to know what everybody's doing and also to collaborate. So keep that in mind. If there's any longer form topics, please add them to the In the Weeds later on as the final section. So keep an eye there as well. And let me start. I got a number of PRs out on Friday that I need to follow up on. Basically, I was doing a lot of like internal optimization stuff, and I created a bunch of separate PRs for those things. My goal is to get back into Python land and then get back into native Wi-Fi land after that. But let me talk about those PRs just a bit. First, I showed this on Show and Tell and on my stream, but I'm adding a memory monitor module that has allocation size and allocation alarm for easier debugging of memory use, specifically allocation sizes. So allocation size, you can, for a given chunk of Python code, it will count how many allocations you have of different sizes. And allocation alarm allows you to actually raise an exception for an allocation of a given size from your Python code, so you can figure out like where in your Python code is causing the allocation. And it's very powerful tools. Just beware of premature optimization. Don't start too early. Make sure that it's worthwhile to take a look at. I also added the .find, .rfind, .index all to byte array. Basically using that in my new requests stuff because that makes it easy to like look in a byte array for different things. I disabled the existing native networking stuff in a PR. That's basically to like shut down the old APIs that we have because I plan on adding new and different ones. And then the last thing I did is I have a PR to enable PyStack, which prevents it splits out a separate area of memory for the Python kind of stack when you call a Python function. And the reason I did that is one, it was allocating to the heap if it got too big. And then it also mixes it in the regular C stack as well. So by having it in a separate place, we can better treat it and better put it in the right place and not also have it impact our heap too. So those are some of the things I did last week. And then this week, I'm going to follow up on all of those and then try to get back and get all my like requests and ESP32 SPI changes to a point where it can actually like get a PR out and get those merged in, probably as pre-releases so people can experiment with them before we actually hit the bundle, because they're pretty big changes. But yeah, that's my goal. And then my goal is to start working on the native Wi-Fi stuff for the S2 on Friday is my goal. So that's it for me. And I should have seen who's up on deck, but going around the circle or the list, I think it's Brent. So yeah, let's go to Brent, and then after Brent, we'll go to Dan. And Brent's mic, I cannot hear. I can see that you unmute, but I cannot hear you. Brent says, dang. Okay, I'll just read it off. And you can keep trying as well, Brent. But Brent's notes say, evaluating NanoPB, which is a plain C implementation of protocol buffers for embedded and resource-constrained systems. It's a library on Arduino. And Brent is typing as well. It says, now I understand somebody else's frustration a few weeks ago. Okay, let's go to Dan, and then after that we'll go to Dave P. I think Dave P, are you drop a comment in the notes or whatever if you're going to be there. But let's go to Dan.
Okay, hi. So I'm still working on BLAIO implemented using an ACI adapter. Last week I got advertising to work pretty successfully. One unfortunate thing is that the code doesn't provide, the HCI code does not provide extended advertising. So we can't do some things that we have been doing as easily, like BroadcastNet maybe, or at least BroadcastNet in certain configurations. But it works fine for regular devices. Now I'm working on something called the attribute protocol implementation. That's when you make a connection, you want to start exchanging information about what services are available. And in the NRF soft device, this was all handled by the soft device. And I sort of expected that to be handled by the HCI adapter, but in fact it's not. It just gives you the low-level data packets sending back and forth. You have to implement it completely yourself. So I'm stealing the implementation from Arduino BLE, and that's written in C++, so I have to convert it to C. So it's sort of straightforward but tedious.
And it's licensed, okay, right?
It has an Apache, no, it has an LGPL license.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not the perfect license, but we wouldn't do it if it's a GPL license, probably. We have to figure out something else to do.
Right.
And other than that, I have the usual reviews to do. But the HCI stuff is like my 95% task right now.
Right.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. All right. Dave P's up, and then I'll read David Glad off afterwards.
So this week I'm going to keep working on why long-running computations block out USB and a good way to mitigate that. And also I need to read and understand Jeff's changes to how background tasks are getting queued up and handled. That's all for this week.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dave. Okay, Deshipu is on deck, but I will first read off David Gloud. David says, provided the PR for the PM25 UART to be more reliable on reading errors. Started to take a look at how to use BroadcastNet to communicate from the Mvira plus Featherwing to Adafruit IO, and wrote a Python script to update my lib folder with a link to the gist there. And then investigating PS2 IO for the PS2 keyboard input, but it only exists on the M4. Yeah, cool. I have a change somewhere where I actually hooked PS2 stuff up into the native serial as well. If you want to take a look at that, it's somewhere in one of my branches. Okay. On deck is Foamy Guy. So let's first go to Deshipu.
Okay, so I rewrote some of the Pew for libraries, so to free some space. So hopefully that will no longer be one of the problematic boards where nothing fits. Pew 10 and Pew M4 now also should last longer on battery because they have lower threshold for brownout detection. And I'm working on a version of Fluff M0 that has a micro USB port instead of USB-C. The one with USB-C works pretty well, so I'm happy with it. Micro USB will be more accessible to people with old computers, probably. So that's also useful, and that's it.
Awesome, thank you, Deshipu. We just had a new person join, Etif. We're in the middle of a meeting. It looks like you muted, so just listen to how things are going. If you want to speak up, just chime in on the CircuitPython text channel. We'll get you into the loop here. And otherwise, Hierophect, you're on deck. So let's first go to Foamy Guy.
All right. This week I worked on an issue that popped up with the progress bar library, or really just a performance issue. It was not broken or anything, but I was able to update it to try to only update pixels that actually need to change, and so that results in it animating a little bit quicker if you're changing it rapidly. I continued the work on the display text library, mostly been working on the background color, and especially as it relates to different fonts, different font types, like the built-in font versus the custom font files. I found the Vectorio module and dove into that, started figuring out how to use it, and kind of looking into how we can enhance some of the other libraries using it. And then next week, I'll be kind of continuing some of that stuff, as well as I want to work on designing and printing a shaped neon NeoPixel strip holder. So they have fancy NeoPixel strips that have kind of like a sort of transparent but frosted look that makes it look like a neon line, I think. Maybe Jeff at one point made a spiral or something. I think that's really where I got the idea. So I'm looking into that. I would like to play with a couple of the microbit add-ons. I got a couple of the little like I/O extenders and robot bits and stuff like that in the mail last week. So I'm going to start trying to play with those on the Clue. And then I noticed when we sat down for the meeting here that there was going to be an update to the Pew M4. So I'll probably go ahead and give that a try out next week as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Foamy Guy. All right, Jeff is on deck, and we'll go to Hierophect for now.
All right, so this past week, I spent some time working on the RGB matrix, so doing some reworks on Protomatter, and working on testing that on the RGB matrix that I have in-house. Still have some bugs, but for the most part, the timer PR is done, other than PR fixes and other little things, tweaks. I also, my other big task for the week was installing the toolchains for the ESP32S2 and just getting a good control setup working so that I know everything's okay, and then getting started on Pulse.io. So I'm about halfway through PWM out and I'll hopefully have that done early this week. So this week, other than wrapping up PW out, which is a couple days, hopefully short. I'll be working on Pulse Out and Pulse In, and doing whatever other work I need to do to wrap up that timer PR finally. And then in my off time, I'm doing some custom PCB work, which hopefully will have some boards coming out pretty soon. So that's it for me.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Hierophect. All right. Jerry's on deck, but let's go to Jeff first.
Hello again. So the thing I'm most excited about last week was the merge of the background tasks PR. I also did, I think, 2 smaller PRs on ESP32S2, which was a good way to get my feet wet. And I also did improvements to some libraries, and it was fun to swim on that side of the pool. And like Scott mentioned in the community news, I have written a couple of CircuitPython blog posts over on my personal blog. It's probably not going to repeat like that, but I just had a few things that were interesting enough to talk about. So besides that, I've been doing some reviews, some community help, came on Show and Tell, and I've been working on my CircuitPython clock project. The blog post, hopefully wrapping all that up together, should come out soon. And after a substantial delay, the new page on CircuitPython the new page on CircuitPython.org for contributing to Weblate has finally been added. I dropped the ball on that a little bit and got that back going this weekend or late last week. So this week, there are at least 2 background task bugs to fix, and I think they were the same bug, and it's PR'd already. So I will be returning to SDIO, wrapping up the implementation for STM32, writing some guide stuff, and kind of my next steps after that are to be determined. Like I said, I will have at least 1 more blog post in the near future showing the clock itself, although I have shared it on the Show and Tell channel here, and continuing to do reviews, community help, and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. All right, Katney's on deck. Let's go to Jerry.
Let's see. Hello. Yeah, I did a quick update to the fingerprint library to add in a function that was needed to run the new panel mount sensor. It's kind of a cool little device. They're fun to play with. And I put that into that library. It's been updated and released. And then I've been, again, spending more time in the endless RFM 9X stuff. One of the things I'd hoped to do was to switch over to using BitBang for the DHT sensors so that I could take Pulse.io out of the build. Unfortunately, it looks like for some reason BitBang doesn't work, or DHT doesn't work with BitBang on M0 boards or M4s for that matter. So I'll bring that up more in the weeds if you want to talk about it there, but there seems to be something going on. And I do have a working build for the RFM9X that fits, but I had to take a whole lot of stuff out: Analog I/O, Pulse I/O, NeoPixel Write, HID, MIDI, Touch, basically anything more than just barely functioning. But it does do I2C and SPI. So, so again, I'll follow up. If you want, in the weeds, we can talk about this. I feel like it's a broken record. So, it's also, if it's not of general enough interest, we can defer this to just on to Discord chats too. So just let me know. Well,
that is what the In the Weeds is all about. So
okay,
I think we can at least talk about it a little bit more. And if it, I don't know how helpful I can be anyway. But
we'll see.
We will find out. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Jerry. Okay, on deck we have KMatch 98's notes, but first we'll go to Katney.
Hello. Geez, stick a page break in the middle of my notes and it takes up more than a page. So last week, updated the BMP 280 guide to include the new STEMMA QT version. Fritzing diagrams added to the PCF 8591 guide, and the Fritzing object has been updated with all the metadata needed now that we've actually got them. Worked with Phil and the team to put together a section for the welcome channel on Discord that explains what Adafruit and the Adafruit Discord server are, We've added the Adafruit Discord server to something called Server Discovery, which means now people can go and search for things like DIY or education and that kind of thing and find the Adafruit server. So versus for a long time, people knew about Adafruit and then found the server, we have people who are finding the server and then learning about Adafruit. And we had nowhere to point people. So if you get anybody asking on Discord, hey, what's an Adafruit? We have a little blurb in the welcome channel that you can point them to that covers what the server is and what Adafruit is. I updated the CircuitPython on Linux and Raspberry Pi guide to include PWM. Melissa got PWM support added to Blinka, so now you can pulse an LED or control a servo directly from your Raspberry Pi using Blinka, the CircuitPython compatibility layer for CircuitPython. Updated the servos with CircuitPython guide to include some Raspberry Pi references for the same reason. Completed the PMSA 300i guide and put it into the moderation queue. That is an air quality sensor that stemma QT connectors on it, tiny and handy. Does air quality particulates sensing. So that guides in moderation should be out soon. So if you have one of those or you're looking to get one of those, the guide will be out real soon. We have a library for it. That's the important thing. We updated the PM 2.5 guide to use the new PM 25 library, the same thing that the PMSA uses for both CircuitPython and Arduino. There is an Arduino library as well. In what's going to prove to be a long ongoing project, move the first CircuitPython library from master to main for the default branch. It's the Adafruit Circuit Playground library. Started updating the contributing to CircuitPython with Git and GitHub guide to reflect the in-progress move from master to main. There are duplicate screenshots now for everything that have both master and main, which were actually just edited screenshots, but same difference. And every reference to master now says main or master in the text. So, and then it also shows how to go to the GitHub library on GitHub and view whether or not your library is using master or main to know whether or not you should be using one or the other. And then also instructions for updating your local clone and your fork, if those are things that you use in part of your workflow. Eventually, everything will be moved to main, and like most of this can be removed. But for now, there's a lot of extra stuff in the guide because we aren't moving everything all at once. So there needs to be like a transition period. Mm-hmm. While I was updating that, I realized that it's deeply out of date and needs to be updated. It still refers to the old GitHub UI, which turns out was a more significant change than I realized. I kind of adapted to it without really registering it. The problem is because some of the things are in similar places, but the wording on the buttons have changed, things like that. They have rearranged quite a few things. And so if you've never used GitHub before, those screenshots are useless to you. So I've updated a few of the screenshots, but we also refer to Travis in the guide, which we don't use anymore. I updated screenshots where that was enough, but the entire pull request section needs to be redone to address the UI changes and to address the move to actions and using Black as part of our workflow. So that's something that there are some other things that are currently a priority, but that will need to happen because this guide is pretty widely used, it turns out. It's one of the few that I'm aware of that. People are constantly referring to it. It's odd because you write guides and you don't know if anybody reads them. But this one I'm constantly getting feedback about. So awesome. This week, actually, I already did the first one, which is add fritzing diagrams to the BH1750 guide. I'm going to be doing fritzing objects for all the things. I have a huge list. Tomorrow's the newsletter video. The VL53L0X has now been updated to use stemma QT, so I need to update the guide with that version. And then once that's done, unless something else takes priority, which is a distinct possibility, hopefully I'll be able to get to updating the GitHub guide. But there's no guarantees because we have a ton of new products. It turns out when Lamore can't go outside for more than 20 minutes a day, a lot of things get designed. And it's been very hot in New York. So a lot of things have been designed. So we have a lot of new products. And that means I have a lot of work to do. So after I get that guide updated, the VL53L0X guide, we'll see what happens next. And that's what's going on with me.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney, for doing all the things. Okay, Melissa's on deck, and I'll read notes from Kmatch off. So Kmatch says, past week, reviewed display text updates. To do this week, bundle up the Sparkline library into a usable format with examples. Learn how to build CircuitPython so I can tackle a minor bug with display.io group.insert. And other demoed the all-mechanical 7-segment display counting 0 to 9, which there's a link in the... Actually, I'm going to just drop this link in the notes because there is a YouTube video that looks really cool, and I want to watch it later. So I put that in the notes. Decide what mechanical project to restart, the self-rolling D12 die or the rope braiding machine. So that's it from Kmatch. Stargirl's on deck, and let's go to Maker Melissa.
Hello.
Hello.
Last week I finished writing 2 guides for the e-ink display. I reviewed a guide page update from Katney about pulse width modulation. I fixed the image reader library for Arduino to work more efficiently at the e-ink displays. And this week I'll be working on RGB matrix version of the PyPortal type library. So I'm looking forward to doing that. And that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. All right. With that, let's go to Stargirl.
Hi. I wrote another blog post about the SAMD ADCs. This time it's about how to squeeze the most accuracy out of it. I'm planning one more blog post about using DMA with the ADC to measure multiple channels at once. Well, not at once, but in the background so you don't have to spend CPU time doing it. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I'm still in the process of moving across the country, taking up all of my time, and at this point, most of my equipment is packed away. So I sadly can't really work on any projects anymore, which is definitely bothering me. But hopefully I can hit the ground running in August once I get settled in.
I'm sure you will. And good luck with your move. I'm sad, but happy for you.
Yeah, it's a little bittersweet, but I'm looking forward to being closer to family.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, yeah, let us know when you're back up and running, and good luck with your move.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Stargirl. Now we are in our last section, in the weeds, which is a chance for us to talk about all sorts of different things. But before we get into the weeds officially, I wanted to just point out to Warrior of Wire, who just joined, that we did have multiple hug reports for you, so make sure and check the notes doc for those thank yous. And with that, let's hand it off to Foamy Guy and Kmatch98 to talk about display text.
Yeah, all right. I think Kmatch is having a little bit of trouble joining in, so I'm going to take over talking about it in the weeds here. But we have kind of two quick things to talk about. One of them is documentation of the existing display text label. So the display IO, there's like a welcome to, or it's actually linked in the notes doc there. The display support using display IO, sort of the main display IO guide, has a page with explaining the text, but it really only shows custom font and built-in font. It doesn't show the background colors or anything to do with like anchored position or anything else. There may be a few other things I'm that are slipping my mind. But basically, we're both interested in getting that guide page updated to reflect some of the newer features of the label class. So we just wanted to get feedback there if anybody else is interested in that, and kind of what steps we should take to go down that road if there is interest in it.
Yeah, I think Carter wrote that guide.
I know there's a great additional one in, it's like I think a Candy Hearts or something like that came out around Valentine's Day, that has some other, it's got really good information for it, but it is like tied to that one project, not in the sort of welcome to Display.io.
Right.
How much more information do you think that you would want to convey? Like, having written a guide now, do you think it's too much for a single page, or do you think it would fit on that page?
Yeah, I think it would fit on that page. I think the main two things right now are the background color and the anchored position.
Okay. If that's something you would like to put together, then we would be perfectly happy to have you update that guide page.
I can work on that. I'm sure K-Match will be interested in helping me with that as well. But yeah, we can definitely, work on that.
That'd be perfect. Let me know, and I will get you added as a contributor to it. And that should open it up for you to be able to update that.
Thank you. And then the second one was a little bit more looking towards the future. So K-Match has created a library he called TextMap. It's basically just like bitmap labels, though. It's as opposed to the existing label, which kind of creates a tile grid and a group for each individual glyph inside the label. His will create sort of one bitmap and then keep all the text inside of that. So it winds up using less memory, especially if your text is rather long, if you have a few sentences or a paragraph or something like that. So the main question is kind of, is there interest in having that added to the actual display text library? And the main reason why it kind of came into my mind was that library has, I'm not sure the proper sort of Python term for it, but it has a directory, and then it has, the label class inside of it. So lots of the libraries are sort of single files, and the way that one was tucked in the folder, kind of got to thinking it probably was done that way in anticipation for having new sort of classes added to it over time. So I think this bitmap label would be a great one for that, but we wanted to get feedback from the rest of the community, and then kind of the same thing there. If there is an interest in that, kind of what the sort of next steps would be there, especially around like guidance on API and how to get that added in and stuff like that. So
I think, I definitely don't want it in the existing Python file, but having it in a separate Python file is totally fine. API wise, I would say just make it make it that you could just replace one with the other. Like just do the same API.
Yep, that was my thought, was to try to keep it as similar as possible. My main question there was I didn't know if that would end up with more confusion, since there's two that kind of work the same, but there's likely to be subtle differences. But I was kind of leaning towards that idea of just make them as close as possible, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think you already explained when you want to use one and not the other. So I think that's totally fine. And exactly what you just need to be like, okay, this is when you use this and this is when you use that.
It won't be the first time that we've done something like this. And having it be a drop-in replacement is the easiest way to do it, because the least amount of explanation and code breaking and that kind of thing.
Cool. Yeah, I think that pretty much covers our topics. So yeah, we'll be working on that. I'm sure there'll be news to share probably in the next few weeks.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for taking that on.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, and I think that takes us to Jerry.
Okay, so 2 topics, and again, we can cut both of these short or spend some time on them, whatever you want. The first one goes back to this Dht Driver issue that turned up, and the backstory is that at least on the Raspberry Pi, the library was modified so that I guess originally the Raspberry Pi Blinka, I think, did not have Pulse IO, so that it would automatically say, "Oh, it would fail." It would try to load the Pulse IO module, that would fail, and so it would then go and switch over to using Bitbang, and that's been working, and it still works. There was just a fix put in, I think, to make it work better, or make something work better on there that Dylan did, but I think, in general, it's okay. But so I got to thinking when I was trying to play with the RFM9X stuff, and I need to get rid of Pulse IO for space. I thought, oh, gee, I'll just let it bitbang. Well, it doesn't work on the M0 board. It just misses most of the pulses. And I thought it worked on the M4s, but it doesn't work there either. And so now I'm wondering, is this something new? Did it ever work on most of the M4 boards, and most of the M0s, not the non-express ones, have Pulse IO, or actually they all have Pulse IO in them, so it would use Pulse IO. Well, Pulse in part of Pulse IO.
Right.
So my question was, did it ever work on them, and should it have ever worked? And does anybody care? I
don't think we ever tested using Bitbang for DHT on CircuitPython proper. Okay.
And so it's, you mentioned last week when I first brought this up that probably it was just there's too much going on, but I didn't know, particularly on an M4, I was surprised it didn't work. But I didn't know if maybe some of the new changes to do with the low power stuff were exacerbating the problem or not. But whatever.
Well, I mean, that is true. Like, Dave P did just fix some pulse in issues.
Yeah, pulse in. Well, I mean, as I think it does it. So, I don't want to say that pulse in doesn't work. The DHT driver doesn't work, and it's using pulse. I'm sorry, pulse in works fine. Sorry,
it's the Bitbang version that doesn't.
It's the Bitbang version that doesn't work.
Right.
Pulse in works great, even on an M0. There's no problem with pulse in. It's the Bitbang that doesn't work anywhere, and so if nobody cares, nobody wants it to run, then that's fine. It does raise the question as to why do we even have it in Blinka, or why do we need it on the DHT? Is it because are there some Blinka implementations that don't have Pulse IO?
I believe so, and I also think that the Bitbang stuff came before Pulse IO.
Right. So it's just a question whether it needs to still even be there. But I guess if there are some implementations that don't have Pulse IO, it's probably helpful. So no need to take it out.
Right.
But my hope of using it, again, I'm not recommending anybody spend a lot of time trying to make DHTs work. In fact, I think people should forget they exist.
Right.
To move on. There's so many better sensors.
Right. I mean, if that's what it takes to get your new RFM9X code in the M0 builds for those specific feathers, I'm totally okay if you just turn it off.
Yeah. Okay. So that was my. So let me move on to the next thing then. So I think your answer to my question is that it probably never worked, and nobody really cares. So let's. Yeah. I won't open an issue on it. We'll just leave it alone and just don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
But okay, so then if I can ask about the RFM9X stuff, what I found is that I can juggle things and struggle and move things around, and I can maybe get it to work with Pulse IO or with NeoPixel Write or with one or the other on the English translation, but it's never going to work on the German translation.
Right.
It's just, there's just not. So rather than keep struggling with that, is it acceptable to say, okay, I'm just going to take all that stuff out? Analog IO, Pulse IO, NeoPixel Write, HID, MIDI, SAMD is turned off. So, there's a lot of stuff not there. But, and it does work for most I2C sensors.
Yeah. I mean, for those two boards that we're talking about, right? Like the M0, 6X, and 9X, the only reason people are going to have those boards is whether they want to use those radios.
Right.
And so I think that, we don't do a great job of supporting them already.
Right.
And so if we don't do a great job of supporting other stuff, but we do support the radio, I think that's a strictly better thing.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, and then the question that came up that I was thinking about when I did this was that it is, when I do this, it probably is going to break things for some users who've been using them and gotten something working because they're using some of those modules. Now, if somebody really wants to, I'm assuming they can load the basic version in, an M0 basic, which has all that stuff, all those modules back in.
True.
Now, they're probably not going to have much RAM to work with.
Right.
But it will be the only difference between a basic and an M0 right now and the 9X build is the definition of 2 pins.
Right.
And so you can do that through the microcontroller pin. No, even on a basic. So if you had to take a basic and loaded it into an RFM9X board, you could run the radio using the microcontroller.pin to assign the 2 pins, correct?
It depends, because there is a code size optimization you can do to ignore pins so that they don't show up in microcontroller.pin.
Okay, because I did a quick look. I didn't look on a basic, but I looked at the RFM9X build, and there are a lot of pins defined that aren't in the pins.c file. A lot of pins in the microcontroller.pin list. So I'll take a look at that, because at least that would give people an option if somebody really needed to use those other libraries or needed something, they would have something to work with.
Do we already turn those off for the radio boards? We must.
I don't know. No, I don't think so.
Because that would save some memory.
Right, it would save some memory, and maybe like the one I would hesitate the most to turn off is NeoPixel, actually. So I would like, if we could win some space back, I would put NeoPixel back.
How do you turn those off? Turn that off?
It's a define that's like ignore _ the pin name.
You can look at the Pew boards, because I do that.
And is it done in the npconfig file, or is it done right in the pins.c file?
It's in the H file.
npconfig.h. npconfig.h. Okay.
Right, and yes, so there is potentially some stuff you could do there. The problem is the Feather actually brings out quite a lot of pins.
Yes.
So you may not have that many pins that you don't want to access.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take a look at that and see if it would be nice to get NeoPixel right back in. I think, because I think people do like to be able to make things blink.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's yeah. All right. I'll keep poking, but at least taking Pulsar out gives me a little more breathing room.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay. Thanks. Someday this will.
Yeah, and I think I think Lamore does intend on making M4 versions of those boards at some point. It's just not never been the priority.
Sure. Oh, that'll be really nice.
Yeah.
Even a NRF 52840, so you can do Bluetooth and the radio. That'd be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Okay, let me pull my notes doc back up, because I was trying to look at that. Okay, let's go to Deshipu.
Okay, I know this has been discussed previously in the context of making available the default content that the boards ship with. But I just stumbled upon this problem again, so I would like to revive that discussion, if possible. Thing is, with the changes to the Pew libraries, I needed to change the menu program that is shipped with the board by default.
Yep.
The one that lets people select which game to play. Because I removed the graphics that were baked into the libraries, and now I'm using fonts instead of the graphics there.
Okay.
The thing is, the old menu will probably crash because it won't find the graphics where it expects. So I wonder what would be the best way to make sure that people who upgrade devices also will grab the new version of the menu program along the way. And in case of PewM4 in particular, because I don't use external flash, I could generate an UF2 that replaces everything. That includes the file system, basically.
Right.
So after upgrade, they would be have a fresh device. Another thing that comes to mind is just to put a note on the board's page on CircuitPy.org with a link for downloading the new version, but I'm afraid most people won't and see it. And I remember there was some discussion previously about a general way of making the default content available for a board.
Right.
So on CircuitPython.org. So that's the thing.
Yeah, so we do have a repo that we mean to put all the default stuff in. I don't know if we're that great about it. So a note just on the side in the description for the board would be fine. But one thing I could think of it also is like, I guess your problem is that it's the old main code that'll crash. Because like we already have this thing with MPYs, right? Like if the MPY is too old, we'll like direct you to a guide that teaches you or tries to walk you through updating. So that's one option. And I should also random thoughts. The other random thought I have is that to make a UF2 that includes the file system, you can actually just drag the current .uf2 back off when it's internal.
Yeah, I know.
So
that's super easy.
Yeah.
I mean, if we wanted to automate it to make it downloadable, then that would involve a bit more. But it's just concatenating the two files, right? It's.
Right.
I mean, before generating the UF2, you can bin file.
Right, and you could also just do a UF2 for the file system as well. Like you could have them be separate.
One. I guess so.
And I'd like to get to that point too. I'd like to get to that point where we can do external flashes.
I figure out that the bootloader actually has some room in there. There's super SPI flash as well. It would be awesome.
Yeah.
And that's definitely for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, I will prepare an update with the node for the time being.
Okay.
And that works. Thank you.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah, I just threw some things at you, so I'm glad you feel like you have a place to go. Okay, let's go to Dave P.
Hi. So while investigating some performance issues and my code behaved the way it did, I was playing with the optimization flags. This was on a SMD 51. And the particular issue I was looking at with the default capital O little s for smallest optimization, the loop took 4.1 seconds. And when I changed it to big O2, it dropped to 2.1 seconds.
Wow.
It added about 10% to the code size, but it still fit comfortably in the M4's 512K of flash. O3 didn't fit. It was over by about 100K.
Okay.
So my question is it worth trying to use a optimizer that gives better performance on those boards that have room to support it? You know, I know that an M0, every single byte counts basically, and so we want the smallest possible.
Right.
Some of these newer, larger have room for better optimization, I think.
Yeah, I think if that's interesting to you, then I think it's totally cool, and we should merge it, and that would be awesome. As somebody who was just doing some performance work, like I've always kind of like tried to keep us away from that, just because it can be a time sink. But that's not to say that we shouldn't do it occasionally, and that we shouldn't look at it. I do think there's something to be said to have it be built consistently across boards, but I think that's less and less of a thing now that we have more and more different platforms. So basically, sure.
Yeah, I think I would wonder if it still fits even with the largest translation. Hopefully it should. But
we
if there's
know what-
100K left over, that's probably fine.
Do we know what the largest translation is? I can test that.
German or Pinyin Chinese.
I would encourage you to just make a PR for it and let the CI build everything.
Yeah.
That's what it's there for.
And people who want to use ULab optimized, that might be really interesting.
Yeah.
If the FFT is going to be twice as fast or something.
Yeah, I mean, for this particular thing, twice as fast seems reasonable to try to shoot for.
Yeah. I mean, that seems significant. So yeah, I think people would be happy about that.
Yeah, we never really did this, right? Just to be consistent, right? But
yeah, I mean, we spent most of our time just trying to fit in this AMD21 build.
Yeah.
I do know that there are some M4 builds where I do think we are pretty tight, but I think that's like the SKU that is like 512 flash and they don't have externals by flash. Because I think in that case we give 256 internal to the internal to the file system and then 256 internal to the M4.
Okay. Is there anything in the board's definitions files that would tell how much is available? There must be, because if it's too big, it tells you.
Yes, I think it's just the linker script.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if you looked at a typical build, if you looked at the results of the actions logs, you could probably see, you could like just look at some build and see how much space is there. Like if you look at a recent pull request or something.
Okay.
In GitHub Actions. Also, there would be what the NRF has the NRF boards are pretty big, have big flash, so that's another one that would be interesting for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll play with that and see what I can come up with then.
A tangent to that is also that if we're starting to feel less constrained code size wise, I'd love to look at Clang again and just evaluate using the Clang toolchain instead of GCC. When I looked last time, it was a case that it did not produce as small of code. But I love all the tooling around Clang, so I'd love to take a look at that again.
Okay.
But that's
not
a huge priority.
We'll look at that sort of thing and see if there's any reasonable ways to do things.
And your example, when you were this 2x speed up was when you were testing was that in general or was that with the exponentiation testing?
No, that was just the exponentiation, but I'm assuming that if it makes that faster, there's probably other code that it makes faster as well.
Right. There is some code that's already compiled sort of with more optimization. There are a few modules that are compiled with more optimization, like the interpreter, to make that faster. So yeah, it would be interesting to see how that, I mean, look for those in the makefile exceptions. And then,
excuse me, go ahead.
Yeah, and then whether, since most things are not as compute intensive as the long end stuff, it would be interesting to see, like in general, like does it make display I/O faster or something like that? That would be a really interesting question.
Do we have any sort of overall performance tests that I could run?
No.
Okay.
We did some very simple, like just a while, increment loop or something. Right. There were some.
I understand that functionality right now is more important than performance, but I figured for 2x speed up, it might be worth looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And those are the types of wins we want to spend the time on, right? Like we don't want to spend a week on 10% gains, but if we can get 50% gains, then that's pretty awesome. Or whatever the percentage is.
Yeah. I mean, there were some changes that we made a while ago that got a 10x speed up, which we're really happy about. So
yeah.
That was like the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, and some other folks have examples as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like the trap I'm worried about is the trap I feel like MicroPython's in. Like they have some performance benchmarks that they did, and for example, we found this pathological case with like loops that allocated only 2 blocks or more, and they knew about that problem, and they had a fix for it, but the fix made their performance benchmarks like 1 or 2% slower, and so they never integrated it. And yet they had this terrible worst case that was just like completely unacceptable as a result. So like that's the thing I'm trying to caution us against is just like being so tied to our performance benchmarks that we don't like we either waste a bunch of time or we don't actually like handle some pathological cases.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks so much, Dave. It's awesome to get your help on this stuff. Okay, Warrior Wire of Wire chimed in and just wanted to do a quick sync on async. You could call it unsync, I guess. But yeah, you wanna give us an update on your thinking on that?
Sure. Let's see. So async await syntax, for people who aren't aware, is supported by MicroPython, and we just have it disabled on microcontroller builds. Turns out it is enabled for the Unix tests, and so the Unix port tests and the Unix port coverage tests, which I found out they are those two test paths are different. One tests the Pi compiler and one tests the MPY compiler. So I found that okay. So what is the issue? Why don't we turn on async await syntax? Historically, the issue has been that MicroPython implemented async await keywords, and like an async def method as a generator, which has certain implications, like you can use the language keyword next on it, and in CPython you can't do that. So there's some code that you could write in CircuitPython, like if we were to turn it on. So there's some code you could write in MicroPython that would not execute on CPython if you wrote it the wrong way. So I took a look over the weekend at increasing some of the compatibility, or like error checking with async def and between CircuitPython and CPython, and the one case that I tried to tackle was a really simple one with I looked at a bunch of them. This was just where putting await in a method, you shouldn't be able to put await in a method unless it's inside of an async def method, and you can do that in MicroPython. So I went into the compiler to lock that down. I made it work for .py files, but .mpy is apparently go through the compiler a little bit differently. And it occurred to me that this really should be a change that is made upstream if it's going to be made, because it's very core to the language. It doesn't seem super right to do it in CircuitPython unless we don't ever intend to merge back. So I guess that's the unstructured. Too long, didn't listen.
Well, so I think you and I are on the same page in terms of what my goals in kind of like blocking your original PR was, which was the idea that I'm much more concerned about being compatible with CPython than I am with MicroPython. You know, the pitch is that you learn something on CircuitPython and you can apply it to CPython. But the reverse is not true. Like, we can't do everything CPython could do. And I think we're on the same page with that, and it sounds like you made really good progress. I think it's totally fair to want to do it upstream, but from what I've seen with like the F-string support that we have, like, it just takes a long time usually to get things upstream. So I would encourage you to PR it upstream, but also we don't need to wait for them to do that.
I see.
Then, yeah. I mean, we can have a conversation with Jim and Damien about it, but just from what I've seen, that they're just, it takes a lot longer for them to take stuff in.
From our conversation on GitHub with Damien, it seemed like he was satisfied with using generators to implement async, and you know, from his perspective, you know, with a low concern about compatibility with CPython, it's a bunch of extra code and probably wasted effort and wasted code to have. Like, really what we need is that underscore await, or underscore await underscore magic method that doesn't exist in MicroPython to do this correctly. Yeah, that I remember looking into that once upon a time, and it goes really the rabbit hole goes pretty deep.
Yeah, I believe that, and I don't want to send you down that rabbit hole. You know, what I was hoping is that you could still implement it with generators, but basically have a second type of generator that just locks down the thing like next, so that you can't call it on it. But internally, like internal to MicroPython, it's like all the same code. It just, like, now you have to check for two different types instead of one. But the example that you're talking about of like await within a non-async def thing is like unfortunate.
Yes.
Right, because that's like before you get to that point.
Yeah, it turns it into a generator scope, and the way that the language works, it says, oh, if it's a generator scope, then I can put await in it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's too far down my strict CPython compatibility of putting await in a function that's not correct. I mean, I had only thought about the case where you're like given the object back and what can you do on that object. But I don't know. I really like
the other thing that seems less bad about this case is once you take that code over to Python 3, it'll just give you a compile error. It's not going to happen after your program's been running.
That's a good point.
That's correct.
Right up front. So that is great in terms of detecting the problem.
Right. I think Pylint might complain about it also, since it's going to compile it. So it may any of that code that we put in a library, anybody Pylinted would get upset about immediately.
Right. So yeah, I'm willing to add that kind of like to this policy of like, we can differ from CPython if the way that we differ leads to an error immediately. Like,
gotcha. Like on import, it's a syntax error to put, like in Python 3.8, to put await in a method that is not async def. So like, yeah, it fails on import.
Right. Whereas this, like, calling next on the return object, it won't fail on import. Right. Like, it's just a matter of like, if you happen to run the code and get to that case, then you'll fail. Like, that's the thing I really want to avoid. So yeah, I'm willing to do that. That, like, I like to think. The Shipu points out that there are versions of Python 3 that would run that code. The errors were added later on. Yeah.
I think I said 3.8 though, so
You did.
Okay, good.
and I think that's fair. Like, I'm okay with that. Like, I'm okay if it's not always true for all versions of CPython. like I don't want to block you, right? Like I think this is interesting work, and I'm happy that you're willing to do it. So I want to like put some guardrails up that like handle most of the cases, and then not like if there are really weeds cases, then okay. Like if you're using 3.7 and this happens, like use 3.8. So yeah.
Okay, so that sounds pretty reasonable. Not having to achieve a weight and 3.8 behavior, equivalence does sort of it narrows the problem back to, again, the sort of original thing, which is that you don't like that we can call next on on the thing that comes back from an async def method invocation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if people will, but it's the sort of thing that like if people do,
yeah, it seems
kind of hosed.
It seems like an error that, I don't know, if you're writing async def functions and you don't have any clue what to do with them, you could call next on it and it would like execute the function another step, right? Like that might feel surprising when the person goes over to CPython and attempts to like run tests on their code or something.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah, so I think if you could achieve that where like that doesn't work, I think that's a reasonable thing for me to request.
I think it is a reasonable thing to request as well, yes.
Okay. So I think we found a really good compromise, and we've refined our idea of when things should fail if we don't match CPython. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention was that I think we are going to try to merge MicroPython in the next month or two.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah, I know Stargirls wanted it as well, and she's not here to hear this, but we were talking about it a bit, and I think Dan expressed some masochism to do it.
I was willing to do it. I don't think a month or two, correct? I mean, after 2 months, probably.
Yeah.
I looked at the merge yesterday. It's like 904 files. There's a huge amount of documentation files that I'm sure somebody knows about, but like it's a big merge.
Right. Well, I did it once or twice before. Or maybe Scott, did you do it? I did it.
I think I did it like once.
It takes like 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And we were also kind of waiting for them, for MicroPython to say finish 1.13 or something. So
yeah,
they come to a nice stopping point.
Right.
I mean, I'm really busy with a bunch of other stuff. I can't.
Yeah. I was so Warrior of Wire, if you want help with that and advice and want to try to do it sooner, it sounds like you already took a look at it. Like, we are happy to give that advice as well.
Sure. I guess there would be a whole lot of questions because I think there's a fair amount of history. Like it looks like y'all deleted like a whole like documentation subsystem from MicroPython.
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Right, and all the ports that we don't support. So yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of stuff you can just ignore outright. The challenging stuff is like in the Pi folder.
Yes.
Right, and there was also a lot of challenging stuff having to do with streams.
Yep.
So that was kind of the worst.
The last time you did it.
Yeah, the last time I did it, because it wasn't really possible to take. One other issue is that a lot of stuff that they have in Xmod, we have now more put into shared bindings and shared modules, and so you have to like, there's been a change to JSON or something. Well, actually, I think JSON is still on Xmod, but there are things where you'd have to kind of manually move it to another file because we have.
Or we just don't do that, right? Like, we just don't do that in the merge. Like, if it turns out that there was something we did want, like, we can do that as a cherry pick or just like copy it.
Well, it would be nice to know what the fixes are. So, I mean, because, I mean, the main reason to pick up bug fixes is my opinion. Yeah. there aren't that many features that have been added that are to the base language that are all that interesting to us, except maybe this dynamic C modules.
Right.
So,
And I think that's what Stargirl's interest is as well.
Yeah.
The main doc thing is that we moved all of our API docs into shared bindings in line with the C. But we also don't overlap that much with their APIs as well. So there's not a lot that we gain from that.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I'm scared of the string compression thing. Like they did string compression inspired, but they did it differently.
Yeah, I saw that was I went through resolving a few files, and then I ran into one where I saw translate and string compression, and I was like, oh, this is gonna suck, and then I aborted it.
Yep. Yeah, and that's been my hesitancy as well. I should also say that I did have some discussions with Jim, who I talked to more than Damien, and I should probably reach out to Damien again, but Jim works off and on with Damien, and he's on Slack, so he's easier to get a hold of. But he did have some discussion with me about, like, they are, I think, are tending towards the, like, lib MicroPython structure, where, like, my thing has been the opposite direction, where, like, we're kind of the monolithic thing that we integrate other stuff into. But he also pointed out that, like, maybe if we got the MicroPython, like, he would like ports to be separate repos as well. And then, like, if live MicroPython really becomes just the VM, then that, like, is potentially an interesting way for us to, like, not have to worry about this documentation issue that you hit. Like, if it's just, like, we only pull out in the VM stuff.
That would be nice.
Yeah. But, yeah, it's interesting. And you know, at the end of the day, like, the folks that are paid by Adafruit, like, our focus is first and foremost the hardware that we're excited about, because that pays the bills. So.
Right, and I'm excited about async await because it lets more users write apparently inline code to, you know, interact with hardware that's connected via I2C or whatever, and that takes time. So you can have, like, fast responsive microcontroller projects without having to write, like, heinous state machines to keep your loop live.
Right. Yeah, I think I think that it's super cool that you're working on that, and I also want to reiterate that, like, you know, I try to be very clear about our prioritization as people paid for by Adafruit, which is something that I feel like I have some influence over, but, like, we will always spend the time to get other people with other priorities ramped up if they want to be ramped up into the core code, so that folks like you, Warrior Wire, or other folks can get stuff into the core. Like, I never want us to block that, right? Like, I want us to always first and foremost enable people to add what they're interested in into CircuitPython, as long as the experience is preserved.
Right. It feels pretty welcoming here for what it's worth.
Great.
Awesome. I would like to talk to you in a separate thing about using async for concurrency, stuff like that. So, because there are some big stumbling blocks that you may have not seen yet. So I'll talk about it, but not now. Not now. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Happy to whenever.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting some comments about how long this In the Weeds is, and this is exactly why In the Weeds is at the end. This is why we do it at the end, because what can happen, right, is if we end the meeting too early, is we end up just continuing the discussion when the recording is stopped. And that means that, like, people who weren't able to make the meeting or weren't in there still can't, like, go back and revisit it. So I'm totally okay having a meeting that we record long. And if you have to leave, like David's pointing out, like, you're welcome to leave and come back to this. You can come back to this because we have it recorded, but nobody should ever feel obligated to stay the whole hour and a half. Like, if you need to get out of here early and you can only spend a half an hour, please just let us know. We'll accommodate you. That's totally fine. Cool. With that, let's wrap up. I think it may be the longest. So thank you everybody for strapping in for this extra long CircuitPython Weekly. We do this every week at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on Mondays, unless Monday is a U.S. holiday, and then we tend to push it around. We do have a calendar that's available if you want to subscribe to when the meeting will be. Hopefully that helps with time zones as well. Everybody is welcome to join. You can join by going to the Adafruit Discord server, which is adafru.it/discord. We'll get you in. We're there all week, so you can chat with us there. And we have the CircuitPython channel, primarily for development. We have help with CircuitPython for folks who are just getting started. And yeah, this meeting was recorded. The notes will go up along with the recordings, and they'll go to youtube.com/Adafruit. Check that out. There's a list of like 3 years worth of recordings as well, if you ever want to see where we were 3 years ago. Just a reminder, CircuitPython Day is September 9th, 2020 this year. So if you want to participate and help us out with that, please reach out to us. There's also a CircuitPython Day at adafruit.com email. So that would be great as well. And other than that, I think that's it. Thank you everybody for joining and being a part of this awesome community. It wouldn't be awesome without you. And we'll talk to you all next week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all. See you later.